Yo, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Strange Road. I'm your host, Mikey, and of course, always riding shotgun, the bro host, Bub.
What's happening?
Bub, how you doing?
I'm good.
You good today?
I'm good.
You excited for this one?
I got a lot of, vitamin D synthesis over the weekend. I was out in the sun.
So you're ready to go?
I'm fired up. I'm supercharged. I'm
Awesome.
solar powered.
Well, hey, of course, today, thank you to Stoner and Disbro, making everything look and sound good. We got both the guys in here in studio helping us out.
It's an all skate.
Today. Yeah, we got all hands on deck for this special episode. This has been kind of in the works for a little bit, and just working out all the details. But patience. All things come with all good things come with patience. So here we are.
We're like everybody else. We want. Excuse me, I have a cough. We want everything right now, immediately, just like anyone else. We want it now on demand.
Sometimes things got to simmer.
But we also grew up in the generation of tape decks and CD players, and
we had to rewind.
No computers and no digitization. Yeah, rewinding videos and all that. You'll never know, kids.
Yeah.
But so I think we're a little better about it. That I knew that this was going to happen, but it's still like you're still like daily. Like, when are we going to get this one going? Because
Absolutely.
I've been waiting on it.
And all you guys at home, if you're not already, follow us. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. We have a Facebook group, The Strange Road Hitchhikers. Go check that out. Like, subscribe, follow, share. If you like our content, send it to your friends, your cousins, your family.
Yeah.
Get the word out. If
Early
you enjoy
Christmas
the show.
gift.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pack it up. Send it.
Really, really appreciate the hell out of all you guys. And, I think we can jump right in.
Dive in.
Because I'm ready.
Dive in.
Guys, we're going to welcome a special guest who's absolutely been crushing it these past few years. And, the gentleman that we're going to introduce, we're super, super excited. We have podcaster, researcher, entrepreneur, and digital creator, Jeff Foran from Strangeology, everybody. Jeff, we're going to welcome Jeff into the show.
Heck
How you doing, man?
Hey, guys. I'm doing great today. I'm doing great. Just hanging out, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
How was your 4th of July, dude?
It was great. Had some family over yesterday. I fired up the grill, had to get it cleaned out and get some new propane, and we were just grilling like Hank Hill,
You got to get the premium propane.
Yeah. No fireworks incidents, no accidents, anything like that.
No, we actually didn't have fireworks or any sparklers this year for the kids, but we did hear some neighbors firing some off that sounded, is someone's hand okay down there?
Oh my God. A little too close to the ground, kind of a sound. It happens. We've seen it.
I stopped a number of years ago of participating
with mortars,
holding fireworks, shooting fireworks, setting them off anywhere near me. Like I'm almost like the worst about it now. Because I was with my friend's family over the weekend, and we were talking about it, and he said basically the same thing I always say about them. They're weapons. I mean, they're pretty grenades. They're beautiful bombs. They'll make they're very colorful, but they'll still take an arm off, and they are indiscriminate on that. And I'm like, I'm good. Like, I don't need to be a couple beers deep setting off this thing on the side of the road. Like, I'm good. Just a PSA announcement. I like fireworks. I'm not against them, but be safe with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself. Well, first of all, where can we find you? Where can everybody check out your stuff? Because like I said, you've been absolutely crushing it. We've been seeing you from afar and met you at CryptidCon last year in 2022 and kind of got to hang out a little bit. And by the way, I've worn this shirt a bunch of times. If y'all don't know,
awesome.
This is a Strangeology original that I got from Jeff at CryptidCon, and got a little Mothman T-shirt for my daughter.
That's one of my favorite shirts you have.
Time. And actually, I got a comment on this shirt yesterday.
Really?
From Legend and Sarah. Was like, hey, what's that shirt that you had on that Strange Happenings episode? I was like, does it have Bigfoot and a UFO and a Mothman on? They're like, yeah, that one. I was like, yeah, that's a Strangeology original.
It's
so
like the cryptid,
I get comments all the time.
It's like the cryptid bingo shirt.
Oh,
Do you have Sasquatch? Do you have Loch Ness and a Mothman?
Yeah,
yes,
Loch
bingo.
Ness. We forgot about that.
Cryptid bingo.
But yeah, Jeff, just let us know where we can find you, and then we can kind of hop in. I'd love to hear more about you, where you're from, and a little bit about how you got here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So strangeology.com is the home base website. I've got a blog there, and you can find a link to all my podcast episodes, Strangeology Podcast, which can be heard on any podcasting platform. I also have a YouTube channel where I post episodes there, as well as video content as well. You can also find me everywhere on social media: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter to a lesser extent. I don't really tweet too much. But yeah, you can just look up Strangeology and you'll find me. And let's see, what else is there? I've also got a Etsy shop for Strangeology merch. I have a background in design, so I create all my own designs. I've got t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, enamel pins, stickers, magnets, mugs, all sorts of stuff.
Nice.
Prints, maps. Yeah. So coming from the design background, I decided to have like a whole merch line and stuff to help support what I'm doing with Strangeology beyond the content creation. So
Right.
yeah, it's been a journey so far. If you want to hear a little bit of the background of how Strangeology got started,
Yes.
it was the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. I had been at a job for close to 13 years doing graphic design, branding, packaging, all that kind of stuff. Dealt with one of Vermont, where I'm from, one of the biggest companies in the state, doing a lot of their marketing materials and stuff like that.
Wow.
For the studio I worked for. And it was, things were kind of slowing down with the business when the pandemic hit, and a few weeks in, I got the dreaded phone call, and they're like, Jeff, we got to let you go.
Really?
And
after 13 years?
Yep.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah. It was kind of a perfect storm of things. The owner of the company was relocating, and I think they were trying to downsize a little bit anyway. The original plan was supposed to be keeping me on doing remote work, but I think it was just, the perfect storm of like, well, business is kind of like shut down for now. And
but you know what?
See you later.
But you know what? Those are those moments.
Yeah.
Another friend of ours.
Looking back, it's a great thing, but at the time, it sucks.
You get the opportunity sometimes to do things you would never do. A friend of ours was in a job. I think he was let go as well, or laid off, and the potential. But he'd been weighing an option of doing that or going and getting this recording certification or I don't even know what it was, but it's a program of like 16 weeks and this many hours a day. Like, it's a commitment
Audio
that you're not going to do any other time. You're not going to stop your life to do it. And to throw that monkey wrench into these gears that are keeping everything nice and smooth and spinning, and food in the house, and a roof over your head, it's tough to shift that on your own. And I tend to think sometimes it's just such a stroke of luck for people like yourself and him that it puts you in a position to really flourish.
Yeah. It's similar to our story a little bit too. We started The Strange Road in 2020. Kyle got let go from his job after 7 years. We pulled together, started the company, started the podcast, and had some bumps in the road, but we're right there with you, man. That opportunity of the pandemic, where we used to shoot a lot of concerts and festivals and live events, and all that work just went away.
Yeah,
we had nothing to do with like, hey, let's start this podcast. Let's come up with this brand. Let's, we just don't sit around. So like, if there's nothing to shoot, we're going to make something, which is like, just like you said, it's that perfect opportunity where you stepped in and made something and shifted quickly. So congratulations on that move, dude.
It's not easy.
Yeah, no. And it really was kind of like the perfect opportunity because nothing else is going on. And Strangeology had really humble beginnings, right? It started off as just like an Instagram, and I was bored. I was going to start posting about cryptids and UFOs and all that kind of stuff. And my fiance, my partner, I have to give big thanks to her because she was like, just, have fun with it, do it. And then she was like, you should turn this into a business. And I was like, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. So May 12th, 2020, I registered as an LLC with the state of Vermont. And so early on, I had communicated with another user on Instagram who had a t-shirt business, and he was doing a bunch of cryptid themed 40 stuff. And I was talking to him and he was like, "Oh, you have a graphic design background. Why don't you start making designs like with t-shirts and other merchandise, and you can have that kind of be like a backbone to what you're doing with
Brilliant.
content creation." And so that's what I put a lot of effort into in 2020 and 2021. And that's kind of like paying the bills now, which is amazing.
That's incredible.
So I can spend a lot more time doing podcasting, content creation now. And it's just been a really interesting journey. And I feel pretty blessed that things have kind of, putting the work into it has gotten me to this point. It's been a perfect storm of like doing my own thing, and kind of being your own boss is awesome. There's caveats to it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you gotta get yourself to actually motivate and do the work, or that kind of thing. But yeah, it's been great. And it's the thought of doing stuff with cryptids and the paranormal and that kind of stuff, the whole brand behind it, if you will. I was the kid growing up that would always gravitate towards books about Bigfoot and UFO sightings, these old books from like the 1950s and 60s and 70s in the school library that I don't know why they were there. Right. somebody in the library department must have liked that stuff. I'm not sure, but I was always checking those books out and keeping them for most of the year, not returning them. And then watching shows like Sightings and In Search Of, and later on, by the time high school, college rolled around, you've got UFO Hunters and Monster Quest and all that kind of stuff. So I've always had this attraction, if you will, to the strange and the unexplained. So that's kind of where I was like, I'm going to go all in with this. I'm just going to get real weird with it because, we're only on this earth for a certain amount of time. Might as well have fun, Well,
and you're following your interests and your passion, and it's easier to, care about. You're at a job for 13 years. It's great. You're making amazing, but you're in the end, you're still making cool stuff for other people. That was kind of our mission over the years. Like, man, we shoot all these amazing shows and all this stuff for clients and these folks, which has been an amazing career. But at the end of the day, it's not our content. We're shooting stuff for other people. And so the being satisfied from, hey, we made this, we've put this out. It's just, that's what kind of keeps us going. Also is just like, this is our baby. This is our thing. And, you have that with what's going on with Strangeology. So with that passion, you can, you're on the path that you need to be on, Jeff.
Yeah, I think you're on the right road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on the strange road, right? Yeah, it's good.
I feel like if you're going the right way, it is kind of strange, because if you're on the way that that's the comfortable road, that's the routine road, that's the I know this, that's the I do this, shifting yourself again, getting out of that job or that opportunity when it comes along and it feels jarring. And even another friend of mine, I said, I quit my job last year and switched careers, right? And I was like, man, I'm so anxious. I am so daily. I'm just so anxious. And he's like, are you confusing anxiety with excitement? Those are two very similar feelings, right? Mm-hmm. Your body puts out that adrenaline, epinephrine, right, response, whether you're excited or anxious. So like, it's kind of like trying to take your own mind and harness it towards excitement versus anxiety too. And that, I think, is the real key when you get to that point, when you figure out, I can take all this energy I have that's bubbling out, but I can focus it. And that's what, from seeing your work, even the design behind you, I know I saw the Flatwoods Monster at CryptidCon. I saw all of that. You're killing it. Yeah. And it shows though too in the work. It's like a chef that doesn't eat his own food or her own food You know, if you're not tasting it, if you don't have an interest in it, it's probably not going to turn out that well.
Yeah.
You're right. If you don't care about the end product.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's creating content and sharing this stuff with other people out there is just it's a really cool thing, and seeing people's response to it. You know, you get people who are like, oh, I love this, and then you also get the people who are skeptical, or they're like, oh, you're dumb. But
Hey, that's all right. They're going home and watching the Kardashians.
Hey,
don't worry about it.
If you've got haters, that means you made it, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I watched the Elvis film, right? And his manager shows him all the merch the one day, and he's got the I love Elvis buttons and I hate Elvis buttons. And he goes, hey, somebody's going to make it anyways. We should make money off of it, right? And it's like, you're right. People are going to love and hate you, and you can't do anything about it. So might as well make the most of it and keep doing what you love, regardless of what they say.
Exactly.
So, Jeff, I know, I was going to ask you, is there anything, I know you said you read a lot. Is there any personal experiences or anything that kind of even more pushed you into this? Bub and I have had a lot of different experiences over the years that kind of keep pushing forward this passion for the strange.
Yeah. And,
you can only read about it so much, but eventually you got to kind of get yourself into it. Is there anything that's happened to you that you could share?
Sure. Yeah. So I can share a few stories here involving the paranormal and also UFOs. So the home that I grew up in wasn't an old home. It was built in the 70s, and it was a great place to grow up. It was a house on top of a hill on 5 acres. My dad worked every day. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And there was growing up in that house, most of the time it was fine. There wasn't anything weird going on. But as I got a little bit older, maybe like 7, 8, 9, there were instances if I was in the house, just like walking down one of the hallways, or if I was in the living room, there would be this sense of like there was a presence watching you. And there was this one time when when I was like 7, 8, or 9, I was watching TV at night, and I think my folks may have gone to the kitchen or something like that, and I was in the living room and the lights were off, and I was watching cartoons, probably like Tom and Jerry or something like that. And I had turned off the TV because my parents were like, Jeff, it's bedtime. And I looked back at the TV, and it's, one of the old CRTs, right? That 200-pound cathode ray tube TVs.
Indestructible.
This is way before flat screens, guys. And I look back at the TV, and in the afterglow, and mind you, I was like watching cartoons. There was this face of an old man looking back at me, kind of with the male pattern baldness type of thing, like like a Captain Picard type of haircut, looking back at me. I want to say he had glasses, and I was just like, oh nope, and I just like walked out, and I didn't really like register, but I was like, that's kind of weird and creepy. And I remember looking at photos of my grandfather, who had passed away from cancer about 4 months after I was born, and he looked a lot like my grandfather.
Wow,
which was really interesting. And I never met him. I guess he was in such a bad way. He was terminally ill. He didn't want to meet like his new grandson. I had 3-year-old older siblings and stuff, so like they all got to meet him, get to know him and stuff. But he was like, it would be too heartbreaking for him to like meet a new baby and then have to say goodbye so soon after, I guess. So so I always kind of equate that to being like my grandpa John kind of checking in on me when I was a little kid.
Absolutely, he was.
Yeah. And then there was some other instances where my older sister got into Ouija boards for a hot minute.
Oh boy.
And she was messing around with my brother one evening, and I was just watching because I was too scared to like touch the planchette. and they allegedly communicated with my grandfather too. They said, who knows what it was, but it was like, oh, I'm your Grandpa John. And then later on in that evening around dinner time, the phone started ringing, and landline phone, right? Who's got those anymore? Right. And I remember my sister answered the phone, and they said it was like a prank caller or something like that. And it kept ringing throughout dinner time. And we're like, no phone calls at dinner. That was like the house rule. And I ran over and answered it once. And there was this just like creepy, ghostly voice on the other end asking for somebody named Cal. It was just like really weird. Like maybe it was a prank call, like someone messing with the family, but it was just like a weird thing. And then the phone call stopped. But there were other instances that I heard from family members like my brother and also my dad, where in the middle of the night, they would wake up and their bed would be shaking. Like something was shaking the bed, and the temperature in the room got really cold. And we didn't grow up with air conditioning in the house or anything like that. And there was one instance where my dad told me that he heard a voice call out his name that said like, hey, and he was like, what's going on? And eventually he was like, he told this presence, whatever it was, that he was like, no, I don't want to play. I don't want to interact with this. Like, I'm done. And it just like the room warmed up and it stopped. Really, really, really interesting stuff. And there was another instance where in our living room, we had this fireplace with a mantle over it. And there was one morning where I got up and we had this big portrait painting of a scene that had like a nice little lake with some ducks flying. And over the course of the evening, somehow this portrait got up off the nail that's like sticking out that far, like 1.5 inches on this kind of an angle, like a 45-degree angle, got up off of the mantle, didn't knock out over any of my mom had tons of knickknacks and other like smaller picture frames on the mantle, didn't knock any of that stuff off, and it landed on the carpet, didn't break any of the glass on the portrait, and was like laying face down. Whoa. So somehow this big portrait got up by itself off of the nail on the wall, didn't bend the nail down, didn't knock anything off, and just landed perfectly on the ground. And then there was another instance where my mother's best friend who passed away, when was it? I think it was in 2000. And my mom had a picture of her in our kitchen on one of the pieces of furniture we had in there. And my mom had put down this, I think it was like a bowl of like fruit or something like that, like right in front of her portrait. And the next morning that portrait was face down because she hated that fruit. So there's just like some strange odd occurrences in this house that I grew up in. And I can keep going if you guys want. There's a few other stories.
I'm not mad about it. I was just gonna say, like, why?
Well,
why
that's what I was gonna ask.
What's the root?
Is there something with the house or the land? Like Vermont, obviously. I mean, there's so much history. You have Native Americans, there's, early settlers, there's like probably war and devastation. Who knows?
Well, this is why Stephen King always writes about East Coast. Yeah. He always uses the East Coast because that's our old. Yeah. And it gets newer as we go west.
Pennsylvania.
Right. So all Maine. Of the really steeped history. Yeah.
Yeah. Yarmouth, Maine is one of his towns.
Yeah. So the idea, or I guess the theory, is that the man who built the house in the 1970s, he had a son, and that son had died a few days after he graduated high school in a motorcycle accident. I think it was in the late 70s. The house, my family moved into the house in 1985, and it had been unoccupied for, I think, about 3 years. So I'm not sure exactly when the son died. It might have been the late 70s or the early 80s. And then I think the old man that lived there also, he moved away, or he may have passed away too. Not sure exactly the history there, but the idea was that it could have been the spirit of this 18-year-old kid that died tragically in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
And whatever forces brought him back to the home he grew up in,
Right.
that was the place he knew. And it, based on like the bed shaking and like the whispering in people's ears, it seemed more, it didn't seem malevolent. It just seemed kind of like it wanted to play.
Trickster.
But, that's always, a slippery slope in those cases, as I'm sure you're well aware. But the activity of that nature seemed to stop after my dad had words with it.
Yeah. And
so
what I've kind of, over conversations and reading and, similar to you, I've been interested in this stuff forever since I was a kid. But that's the big theme is like when you take back the fear and actually approach it, burning sage, all these things are great. Holy water, you hear these themes, but it's literally like you're going to stand up and you're going to say, I'm done with you.
Right.
You're going to leave my home now. You are not wanted. And for whatever reason, it's like that forceful ability, like your dad did, seems to take care of a lot. Sometimes you have demonic hauntings. That's a whole different level. But
yeah, I can't go there either. I don't want that.
But like you said earlier, Jeff, the little trickster stuff, that's kind of like them. A lot of times you hear they'll kind of play these little games to kind of get you to interact.
Yeah.
And then then you start hearing like claws on the insides of the walls slowly and weird tapping at night. And
so wait. The tapping I've heard.
Yeah,
my wife's
claws
parents
inside of the walls.
On the floor. I thought it was her family dog that time.
Yeah.
I was like, oh God. I don't know what that is, but it's freaking me out. I was good after that. I was like, I don't need to see a ghost. I don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, there was another instance that it doesn't necessarily involve ghosts or apparitions necessarily, but ghost lights. Have you ever looked into ghost lights,
like Marfa lights down in Texas? Yeah, the big Bighorn State Park or whatever that is down there. Yeah, I've read a lot about the Marfa lights. It's very, very, very interesting. Is there another place that has a similar type of phenomenon?
Well, there's a number of them.
Okay.
But I was going to relay a personal experience on that at my house. So when I was growing up in the 90s, my folks decided to get an above ground pool, and it was in our backyard. And I wanted to go out swimming one early evening, and my mother and her late best friend was visiting, and they decided to come out and smoke cigarettes on the pool deck and just hang out and make sure I wasn't going to drown or anything like that. And I was about nine years old, and we had a lot of bats that would come out around our area. I think there was a cave or something up in the hills where I lived. So I was busy dodging bats because they would come down and get the bugs out of the pool and take sips of the chlorinated water, which probably wasn't too healthy in hindsight for them. But I remember I dived down underwater and I got back up and I'm like rubbing the water out of my eyes. And the property, I should explain first, is kind of like a long rectangle. It's surrounded by woods on all sides except for the driveway side, and it's at the end of a road on top of a hill. And the back end of the property just goes for like acres and acres. And I'm looking back there, and just for no reason, and I see this, I want to say it was like a big beach ball size warm orange light that just darted in a straight line parallel to our house, and it just kind of like zipped by like really, really fast. And I was like, huh, I saw something. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like didn't really pay attention to it until a couple minutes later. And I had turned around and I was now facing the house instead of the woods. And I saw it come back from the other direction and just dart through the woods. And there's like a lot of trees. I don't know how it was like navigating, but I don't know what it was. Like we had a little swamp in the backyard, but never saw anything like swamp gas or any kind of earth lights or anything like that. It was just like a really bizarre occurrence. And after that, I was just like, Mom, I'm going inside.
Right.
I didn't even say anything to them. I don't know if they saw it or not, but it was just like a really one-off thing. That was the only time that ever happened. But yeah.
Yeah, sometimes
weird New England.
Yeah.
Oh man, we've had some folks on from New England. The gentleman Dennis Stone from America's Stonehenge has been on the show. Mike Luoma, who studies New England stone chambers, and we got into it with Mike about all kinds of paranormal stuff in New England, and Dennis as well. And it's just, I've been a fan of Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman, who wrote a book about Giants on Record, and they talk about stone chambers. Those guys are really into Ohio earthworks and ancient mounds, and all that stuff just ties together. But it's like New England has the ancient chambers. We have the earthworks. Ohio is a hotbed for paranormal activity. New England seems to be a super, super hotbed of paranormal activity. And it just feels like there's so many New Englanders and Ohioans that are just into this stuff and have had experiences, or there's these nexuses of strange. And, I believe Dennis is in Rhode Island. So, there's lots and lots of things happening in New England.
On the East Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We've got the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire. You've got the Bennington Triangle in southern Vermont. It's a lot of weird stuff definitely happens here for sure.
What is it where you grew up? What was it like? I mean, was this a common thing as far as like just even people saying like, oh, I saw something or something in the house, or was that what you had experienced common? I didn't hear from a lot of people that I grew up with. Certainly, there must have been some other experiences. There was, I had a friend growing up where in the 5th grade, his family bought this old farmhouse from the 1800s and did a lot of sleepovers there and stuff. And they had this big old barn on the property that had something living in it that wasn't alive. And wait.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go into this.
We used to go in there and like do ghost hunts and stuff, because there was, it was so long ago. So I'm trying to wrap my brain on exactly what the first experience was. But
what sparked
I think we were just playing in there one day. They had like an indoor chicken coop for their chickens, and it was an old cattle barn, so it had like the concrete floor with like the troughs for waste and putting hay down and stuff like that. They didn't really do too much to spruce up the barn except for put chickens in it. And we used to go in there and play. We'd bring in super soakers and have like super soaker battles and stuff like that. And there was this one instance where I remember looking up at the ceiling on the ground level. There was an upper level too, but I remember looking at this hole in the ceiling, and I don't know if it was just like part of the woodwork or what, but I remember looking up and it looked like there was this eyeball looking down at me, and I was just like, oh, what's that? And I just kind of kept going on. And then another instance, we were in there, and there were, I think my friend's dad was like into real estate or something, so he was never around. He's always showing houses and stuff to people, and his mom was the librarian in our high school, actually. And at that point, I think she was at a different school, but I digress. No one was in this barn but us. His sister was inside, and we were just in there. It was like the middle of the day, And clear as day, we're in there messing around, being kids. We're like 10 years old. And we hear this voice that says, "Get out." And we're just like, look at each other. We're like, what? And we just booked it. We booked it out of there. And so after that point, we would go in there and try to, like, you know, be cute and hunt ghosts and stuff. And there was this one time where I think it was my friend's birthday, and he had like this big birthday party sleepover. And we went in with like a crew, and we had walkie-talkies and stuff, and they worked outside of the barn, wouldn't work inside of the barn. And one of our mutual friends, I think, said he thought he saw like an apparition or something, but I don't know if he did or not. And I remember everyone was like going to bed. It was like 2 a.m. And I got up to like go to the bathroom, and I look out one of the windows that's facing this barn, and his parents are asleep upstairs, and we're in the living room. And I look out and I see this orb of light going in between the barn windows, like inside the barn.
What?
And I was just like, wow.
Whoa.
Is there anyone out there? And I couldn't see like the silhouette of a body or anything, like if it was someone like holding a lantern.
Right.
Not that anyone's like using a lantern in the modern era, but it was really weird. So yeah, like there's other stuff for sure.
Yeah, like one of those old Coleman, like my dad had, that's like propane. You ever seen those old metal?
Oh, sure,
like
yeah.
Back in the day,
yeah.
my dad had that camping. That's what, you know, if you got some guy walking around with something like
Ichabod
that.
crane.
But, you know, there wasn't like LED headlamps back then. Like, what would that be?
I'm wondering also, Jeff, maybe are you like the conduit?
Are
you bringing the orbs with you? Are you,
point.
you know?
Yeah, it seems wherever you go, weird shit happens, bro.
You've got the shining.
I hope not. But yeah, there's. I don't like to welcome that kind of stuff into my life, but I've certainly experienced more than the average person. I think. There was just this memory just came up. Gosh, I think it was probably about 2008 or something like that, and I was like spending the night at an ex's house, and she had mentioned to me that there may have been an Indian burial ground on her property, and because like her family had experienced weird things growing up, like hearing people outside of the house that weren't there walking by, or having I think there's one instance where like they had just gotten home from like going out somewhere, and the doors were unlocked in the car, but then they were trying to get out, and then they all just like locked by themselves or something like that. But my experience was, this is like one of the weirder things I think I've experienced, was in the middle of the night, I woke up out of a dead sleep, and I can hear this like old timey music really, really far off. I thought I was dreaming at first, but then I like got up and I was just like, what am I hearing? And like no one was awake in the house. And I just could hear this like way off in the distance, old timey music playing. And it was really freaking me out. And I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna try and go back to bed. And it took me a while, but you know, eventually I just kind of like tuned this music out and managed to fall asleep. But it was like someone had like an old
phonograph,
like piano or phonograph, like
Oh, I can imagine
like
it.
One of those
the Green Mile music that they play on the old phonograph.
Yeah, it was exactly like that.
Big band music,
that kind of stuff. Yeah, but like stuff that just you're like, that is not normal for right now, or me to hear at 2 a.m.
Yeah, like in The Shining when the music downstairs in the great room.
That's what I'm like.
Yeah, that's The Shining, dude.
Yeah, it was like 1930s, 1940s era music. And the house that this happened in was built in the 1990s. So there was something on the land there.
100%, dude.
Yeah, maybe stone tape or something like that. Like quartz crystal in the ground. I don't know.
I'll throw a little to that, but I'm not sure that I could. So I've had, I'm sure it's what it is exploding head syndrome. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. You'll hear like
I'm
almost
not familiar.
You might hear a door slam or like literally an explosion, or like someone shout, or I mean, it's jolted me. Like I thought somebody's in my home. I have a lot of strange experiences myself,
that.
right? So exploding head syndrome, you might want to look into that one. It's a really interesting phenomena because you'll swear like somebody's there, and it's just, you do realize your brain is just firing these signals. But to that music one, I've never heard anything clearly enough. But like, there have been times where I've considered the fact that I'm like, I'm not sure if it's like, if it's me. I also play music, so I hear music in my head randomly. I'll hear songs just pop up, and there's a whole band and people singing, and there's female and male voices. Sometimes there's no voice. It's just music, just randomly. Like my head has turned on a radio station, and I'm not sure if the moments where I've thought that I've heard something strange like that, because I've never heard anybody say anything like that, of like just hearing. But I've definitely sat there before, like, I don't know if that's coming through the wall or what's going on, or if there's something on, but I'm hearing something, or I think that I am.
Remember
that's weird.
What Delcy was talking about?
What?
Actually, I don't know
if I was
I'm not
there.
sure if you were in the intro. We did an event at the Friends of Serpent Mountain Summer Solstice a couple weekends ago. We did a live podcast out there, and it was a good time. Did some recordings, but Delcy's intro to the whole event, and we're going to probably talk about this with her further, but she had talked about those guys being down near where the crop circle had landed.
Yeah.
And then Jeff was way up at Serpent Mound, and they were way down there, and they were hearing chanting down below, and the people up top were hearing drumming. And they're like, well, what are you guys singing about up there? They're like, we weren't singing at all.
Oh, she did say
we
that.
weren't singing. We weren't doing any. There's no drums.
She did say that.
And they're hearing like this ancient chant. It's like, wasn't your kind of more modern Native American. It's just like this kind of sound that that just seemed very, very ancient.
Yeah.
And this drumming that the other folks in the different location were hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hearing two different things at the same exact time. Like, well, we weren't hearing any singing, but we were hearing drumming.
It's so strange.
And her growing up next to Serpent Mound, like these kind of audio phenomenon happened quite a bit, where she would hear drumming and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the only thing I can relate.
Yeah,
to this.
Like I said, that it just, he started connecting dots there for me, and I was like, maybe is that what I have, or do I have that? And I have, like, how do I sift that? How do I figure out if it's my brain doing it, or how do I figure out if it's an external, right? Like, that's where I'm like, I don't know how to slice that for myself at the moment.
Well, back in the day when we used to go to raves, and you go home at night and you try to fall asleep, and you hear techno music in your brain all night long.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just completely sunk into your mind.
Yeah.
That's a whole different story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Like, maybe Jeff is the conduit, because who knows how that works. I mean, but seeing these orbs multiple times, it sounds like the one through the woods that you said you saw. What did you guys call that?
Spirit lights.
That's what it's
ghost light. Yeah.
Okay. Ghost lights. I mean,
and you said it went through the tree line, like it didn't go above them; it went into them. But
what's interesting,
it was in the trees. Yeah,
a lot of Bigfoot sightings. All of a sudden, there'll be an orb, like Jeff talked about, before they see like a Bigfoot, or after. Like, these lights are kind of connected with Sasquatch too.
You said you had a lot of woods up there. Any Sasquatch stories from locals or anyone that you know?
Nothing that I knew of growing up. I had, since starting Strangeology, I had looked into stories about different humanoid Bigfoot type creatures that have been spotted in the state. A lot definitely closer to the Canadian border. And there's also the story of the Northfield Pigman, which is close to where I live in central Vermont, which
can we hear that one?
Yeah.
If it was real, it could have been potentially a Bigfoot. So back in the 1950s, there was this local kid in the town of Northfield, Vermont. And again, this is all unsubstantiated claims, probably urban legend, right?
Yeah.
Could be based on a kernel of truth. But the story goes that this kid, local farm boy named Sam Harris, he was cruel to pigs on his farm. And there was, I think it was 1955, and it was cabbage night. So the night before Halloween, he went out to go cause a ruckus and mess people's houses up with eggs and stuff like that.
Been there.
Apparently he went missing, never came back. There was like a big search effort to find him, but no one ever found this kid. And he was a teenager at the time. And fast forward about 20 years later, it's like the mid 1970s, Northfield High School's having a school dance, apparently. And I've been to the Northfield High School. The topography of the campus is weird. There's like a really steep hill in the back that goes up to the sports fields. And apparently a group of kids had snuck out of the dance to go smoke. And at this point in time, I don't know if they still had like areas for 18-year-olds to go smoke on campus, because that wasn't a rule yet. You can smoke at schools back then.
Right.
And so they had gone out to go have some cigarettes. And apparently the story goes that this tall beast came out of the woods, scared the crap out of them. They described it as being covered in like a white fur, and it had the face of a pig. Didn't have any clothes on. So they got scared. They ran back into the gymnasium where the dance was happening. And they're like, there's this monster outside, like, help us. And a bunch of brave students, fellow classmates ran out. I'm not sure if there were any of the, parents, chaperones, or teachers that went out with them. But by the time anyone got there to go investigate and see what was going on, the creature had vanished. Now, that kind of is the big story of the Northfield Pigman. And then people started thinking that this might have been this Sam Harris kid who went missing, and perhaps he had hollowed out a pig's head and was wearing it as a mask and going around and
like Jason Voorhees.
Yeah, and he was like living in the woods ferally and just like hunting wildlife to live. Around the same period, there were local farmers and other residents that had reported seeing this same creature digging through their trash cans at night, or killing their livestock, pigs and pets like cats and dogs and stuff. There were some animal mutilations apparently in the town that went unexplained, and the Pigman was blamed for it.
Jeez.
And now in the 1980s, there's this story floating around. I'm not sure if it was originally posted in something like Reddit or not, but this person posted this story that back in the 1980s, his sister had gone up to this back road called Devil's Washbowl Road. Now there's this area that's up in off of Moortown Mountain. It's like a ridge line that divides Northfield, Vermont, and Moortown, Vermont. And there's not a lot of people up there. It's all forest, very rocky. Apparently there's a lot of caves up there. And so this group of teenagers, I believe it was a boyfriend, girlfriend, and another boyfriend, girlfriend couple, go up there because they heard about the Pigman story and they wanted to do a stakeout to see if they could find the Pigman. And so they find these caves and they're exploring up in the hills, and they were going to camp out for the night. And I guess they were going to like pick different caves. Apparently, seems like a bad idea. Sounds like the start of a horror movie.
I was going to say, that's where the story goes sideways.
and
I think I'll pass on
enough,
that weekend. Yeah, I'm going to be,
Yeah.
I got lots to do. Can't make it.
And certainly enough, it does, because one of the couples goes into this cave and they find all these bones.
Oh, boy.
And they're like, oh shit, there's something is living in here and eating things. And they couldn't tell if it was human bones or animal bones. And they turn around and they're like just about to like get out of that cave, because they're like, we're not seeing here. And the Pigman is standing at the cave entrance.
Oh God.
And he's comes over, grabs a rock, and bashes in the boyfriend's head, right in front of the girlfriend, and she's screaming. And then the Pigman drags the guy out of the cave into parts unknown they don't know where he went. And the other couple hear the screaming and they run over. They're trying to find the cave, and they eventually get there, and they find their friend who's like, a total wreck. Like her boyfriend had just been killed by the pigman and got drug off. And I tried looking to see if there was any reports about that.
Yeah.
Couldn't find anything to substantiate. Yeah.
Hospital.
So it's probably just urban legend. But if you look on, I believe the reports on BFRO, there is I recall reading a sighting that there was a like white-haired Bigfoot type creature that had been seen around the Moortown Northfield area. That wasn't, they weren't calling it Pigman, but reading that sighting, I was like, is that what Pigman was? Is it like an old Sasquatch?
Right.
And I've heard of other people seeing something similar like on their property before.
Yeah.
In the area.
Damn.
So
great story.
In recent years too. So
okay.
I think there's a kernel of truth to it, but I'm not sure if it's a guy that's been living out in the woods for 70 years,
right,
who wears a pig's head as a mask. If it was the same kid, he'd be dead by now.
I hope, I hope it's an actual mutant pig man instead of some dude wandering around with the
escaped
carcass remains of a hog on his head, like some kind of like Lord of the Flies out in the,
I know, that's almost scarier, right?
Yeah, that's no good.
Yeah,
no,
it's Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees out there living off the land.
Right. Give me a portal pig that came here from another galaxy instead, or something. I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be much better.
I will say it kind of reminds me of the Loveland Frogman story a little bit.
It's got a little bit of the Loveland Frogman too.
We had James A. Willison from Weird Ohio, Weird America, Weird US, Weird Indiana, Weird Willis, and we saw him give a presentation on the Loveland Frogman at Frogman Fest that was here in Mason, Ohio, and he was like kind of hesitant not to do this presentation because it's basically saying, well, the Loveland Frogman's really like an amalgamation of 4 different stories.
It's not one story.
Then became the story we all know and love of this weird little frogman doing a magical ceremony with a wand in the river.
Or they got the big bellies with the weird hieroglyphs on them and stuff. Like, there's just so many variants that you're like, what?
And he dug deep, dude.
Yeah, he looked for the truth.
Whoa. And then he kind of rehashed that story on our show, but it's very similar to this. It's like, throughout time, there's these different instances that eventually they all get kind of mixed together and then become urban. Now, I do think,
they get lumped into the pigman category.
Yeah, what James talked about with the creatures on the side of the road that the gentleman saw, which was like actually 10 years before the Loveland Frogman sighting, was these essentially those things is what they were probably ETs. They were probably these extraterrestrial sightings.
Belly ones, little fat bellied ones?
Yeah. And that sighting got mixed in with then the later with the police officers.
The iguana.
Seeing, what.
Maybe an iguana.
Maybe it was
a frogman. That's what.
It all gets mixed together and becomes urban legend. But how many awesome T-shirts and stickers were created out of that?
The one with the frog with the wand I still love that. I love it.
I mean, it's gotten so popular. I haven't seen any Pigman merch yet. Have you got Pigman merch?
I do actually.
Do you?
So yes. Yeah. Well, I have this whole Home State Cryptids line.
Yes, yes.
For if you want to buy like a Home State Pride t-shirt, but have it be cryptid based with the most popular, well-known cryptids in your state.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's all up on my shop. But I did one for the Northfield Pigman for Vermont. And I also have a Champ one too. Nice. Although New York is like, that's our cryptid, but it's also Vermont's cryptid too.
Yeah.
What's your favorite cryptid? Do you have one?
I love the story of the Jersey Devil.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've heard it. I don't know that.
It's one of the most well documented.
I know that I've heard about the Jersey Devil, and I'm like, is it closer to a Dogman? Is the Jersey Devil?
It's a
very different,
its own thing,
entirely different.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm way off.
It's its whole thing, but it's a really interesting piece of like American history and folklore. Mm-hmm. Like there are like actual historical things involved with the story.
Yeah.
The basic rundown of how the Jersey Devil came to be was that there was this woman who was known as Mother Leeds, who lived in the Pine Barrens with her husband. Her husband apparently was a bit of a deadbeat, but also they got pretty busy. So back then people had lots of kids.
Oh,
they already had 12 children.
Jesus.
And it's not clear in the folklore if it was like a lot, if any of those kids died. Infant mortality rates were pretty high back then. So
right.
Look back in your own family tree and you'll see you have ancestors that have 10, 11, 12 children, and a lot of them die from disease or accidents or whatever. Yep. And so she got pregnant with her 13th child and she cursed it. She was like, let this one be the devil, is the famous line.
Good
right?
God.
And so, she didn't want to have any more kids. And so she, on the night she's in labor, giving birth to the child, the midwives are there, and the baby is born, looks like a normal human, but within moments, the legend goes that the child started mutating into this devil-like creature. It sprouted a tail, bat-like wings, its face morphed into this. Some people describe it as being like a goat's face. Others describe it as being like a horse's face.
Horse's face is what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Clawed hands. And then it kind of whipped its tail around. Some stories say that it killed one of the midwives or killed everyone in the family that was in the room. And then it flew up the chimney and went out into the Pine Barrens. And this was supposed to be the early 1700s. And ever since then, it's been haunting the Pine Barrens. And in the early 1900s, 1909, there was this huge flap of sightings where people all throughout New Jersey, I think Delaware, Eastern Pennsylvania, and were seeing this bat-winged, horse-faced creature that was flying around and terrorizing locals. There were trolley drivers that would do battle with this thing. Like it would come and mess around with them. There were local police officers that were shooting at it when they saw it, and it didn't do anything to the creature. It would just let out this horrid screech and fly off into the night. There was this one account where a bar owner was, working in the bar, serving his patrons and stuff. And he goes into the back room, and the back door to this place goes out into this alley. There's a glass door or a glass window in the door. And he sees this shadow of this figure that's standing there. And he goes up and he looks at it, and it's the Jersey Devil, this scary looking monster, and lets out this crazy screech. And he's like, everybody get out of here. So everyone just booked it. So yeah, it's just this wild story. There's an account of Napoleon Bonaparte's brother, Joseph Bonaparte, who had emigrated to America after he fled France, and he had an alleged encounter. He was hunting out in the Pine Barrens and ran into this thing. There was a Navy officer, Stephen Decatur, that had gone down to go test cannonballs for, I believe it was President Monroe, and he saw this thing flying by, and they aimed a cannon at it and shot a cannonball, and it blasted through one of its wings or something, and it kept flying.
Jesus.
And so there's this whole conspiracy theory that the government knew about the Jersey Devil, and the president had sent him down to go hunt down the Jersey Devil. So it's it's this really, really fun story. There's so much lore to it. And I did a whole episode about it on my podcast earlier this year. So definitely, check that out.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
Further detail, go get the whole picture.
That's a weird creature.
Strangeology.
This is like something out of The Witcher.
Right.
We need a modern day Witcher, I guess, to slay all these weird things.
New season of The Witcher just came out.
Sorry, yeah.
Bub and I are pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, I've already watched it all.
Oh, yeah. We watched the first episode last night. So.
I will say no spoilers other than I love that show.
But it's a bummer. Henry Cavill this is last season.
He gave us 3 seasons.
I know, but dude.
Be happy.
The Witcher without Henry?
It's going to be different.
I don't know.
You're just going to have to learn to
Henry,
adjust.
We love you.
Henry Cavill as The Witcher was amazing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Oh, well. I guess move on. It'll still be dope.
Hopefully they keep it to the same kind of storyline. And keep bringing it along because great.
That whole lore though is based off of so many European stories of monsters and
The Witcher.
Yeah, they do great research on, a lot of their monsters are based off of old folklore and legends from Europe. But the Jersey Devil, even up until like the 70s and the 80s, I mean, there are so many sightings up until modern days that is associated with the Jersey Devil and the Pine Barrens,
What is a Baron? What is this Pine Barrens? I think of like the Barrens from like It, the kids playing down at the Barrens. What the hell is the Barrens? Is that where all the creepy things hang out?
I think the Barrens kind of refers to it being a little bit of a desolate place. Like there are people that live in the Pine Barrens. It's this big wilderness nature preserve in southern New Jersey. If you look at any map, you'll see this big round area of mostly forest. Like there are people that live there. And back in the 16 and 1700s, when the area was being settled by colonists, there were a lot of they couldn't farm the land. It's just like the soil didn't have the right kind of nutrients, pH levels, and that kind of stuff because of the pine forest.
Yep.
Yeah, it's too acidic to grow anything. So they found out that there was like iron ore and stuff that could be mined. So there was a lot of like iron and copper smelting furnaces and stuff like that in the area. Okay. But other than that, there wasn't really too much there. It's all just kind of forest. And if you go down, I've never actually been into the Pine Barrens. I've driven near it, like on the White Horse and the Black Horse Pike. One of my buddies who's actually originally from New Jersey, back in the day, we went down to one of the beaches on the Jersey Shore, kind of near Atlantic City, and we were trying to get back we were staying at his grandparents' place, and we got lost trying to like find our way back, and we almost went into the Pine Barrens, but anyone that I know that's been in there definitely says it's pretty creepy. Yeah. I've heard from other people like who have contacted me after listening to the episode that I did about the Jersey Devil that were like, oh yeah, I was out there once and there was like something howling off in the distance and I don't know what it was. So it's like there could be something out there. Yeah, it could be Dogman too. Who knows?
Just for I just needed that for clarity. I'm not going to the Barrens anywhere.
Yeah, Dogman is being in Ohio, Michigan, that's where a lot of the Dogmen sighting, like in the kind of the not early, but the modern stories is that upstate, right there by the Saginaw Bridge of all those stretch of Dogmen sightings that had kind of from then trickled down into Ohio. But, we have a lot of Dogmen stories in Ohio, a lot of sightings here and all the way down through Kentucky and West Virginia and Pennsylvania. Yeah,
it's a whole kind of like a Dogman highway. I found out recently that there are Dogman or type stories in New England. There's the account of the Palmyra wolf pack in Palmyra, Maine, where this family was basically had their house attacked by 5 or 6 of these things. That they bought this old farmhouse that was out on a bunch of land. It was surrounded by really dense, thick forest. There's only one road in and out to the house. And they started experiencing like something out in the woods that seemed to be tracking them. Yep. And then one night they saw these things out in the big field that led out into the woods. And one of them stood up on its hind legs. And then they came at the house and started trying to like get in. Mm-hmm. Oh, gosh. Like, totally terrifying. And there's old accounts back in Vermont, actually, in a town not too far from where I live, of some lumberjacks working at a logging mill back at the turn of the century, and one of them went missing in the woods and came out a few days later, and he had like gone insane, and he was talking about seeing this dog man type werewolf creature, and there's even more recent accounts of someone who lives more in the northern part of the state. And this creature, I think, is being called the Beast of Cold Hollow. And this local woman who lives in this town in northern Vermont apparently had some sightings of like a Dogman type creature, and even got some some audio recorded of its like howls.
Oh, wow.
One night. And some people think, from what I read in my research, that it's like the Lougarou or Rougarou werewolves that are coming down from like Quebec. That who knows if they came over from Europe or what, but it's could be a whole path that goes also down into Michigan as well, through like the Toronto area. Who knows?
Right. I mean, all those waterways up in upstate New York that all connect into upstate New York and Pennsylvania and Ohio, up into Michigan. I mean, the river systems and lakes are just never ending. I mean, that's wild out there. There's tons of deer all over the place.
Usually a good indicator of a path or a junction, though, where somebody's going to follow along.
Yeah,
or be on it, using it as a transportation method.
Connection of dogmen and portals. The
that
portal
one
thing.
I don't get the portal thing with dogmen. How the hell are they getting portals?
It's a mystery. I mean, it's all of a sudden they just, like the Skinwalker Ranch story of the scientist.
Do you think the portal...
After 15 years, they just left Skinwalker Ranch, and some of the things they talked about was like portals opening up and these werewolf creatures crawling out of them and jumping out.
Do you think that's like a being from another dimension letting their dog go out for a walk in our dimension?
Go take a crap in their dimension.
Get going, dog man. Get over there now. Get out on that ranch.
Yeah.
Like they don't want it crapping in their universe. They leave it over here and then they bring it back. They let it hunt and eat over here and grab a person or two, and then maybe that's the agreement we did with the Greys back in the day with Eisenhower. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's strange. Like none of it makes sense. Like obviously it doesn't make sense, right? Like Sasquatch and orbs and dogmen and portals and like. I mean, just seeing all the collection behind you, I know these are all real stories. I know they're all like, Flatwoods Monster and Jersey Devil and the Frogman. And this is all like...
Van Meter Visitor is a fun one.
But it's not just one person. Mm-hmm. Generally, these stories don't arise from one individual eyewitness account, right?
It's not modern either. These stories go back for ages.
They continue. That's the other part that's really interesting is like, is it just a shared collective
consciousness
mirage at some point, or are we actually seeing this? And how do we figure out what we're seeing? Because it's very, like you said it earlier with the whole Fortean context of, is it that little window's opened up and we can see, and then that shuts for a time period, and then do we just not know these cycles of when that happens?
That Keel talks about,
right? Because I think that's a possibility, but.
But I think we're getting closer to the actual answers here in the last 5 years. I mean, think how many like researchers like Jeff and people like that are opening this stuff up, and the cryptids, content creators and the paranormal content creators. Like you have so many sharp people that are opening up to even 5 years ago, there wasn't this much awesome information about all these strange things.
What's happening right now is what happened when I went from being a kid to an adult as a Packers fan. When you were a kid in like the 80s and 90s trying to find Green Bay gear in Ohio, and especially in the country, you're not finding anything that has anything Green Bay.
You're not going to go to JCPenney and...
Never.
Yeah.
And there's no internet. You're not getting... So we just grew up without stuff and hand-me-downs and whatever, right? And it's the same thing with what he's saying about, the research and just the interest alone, right? The spectrum of people that are into this field and love cryptids or love UFOs or love... like you said, I grew up watching, I remember Christmas after opening presents, I went downstairs because it was X-Files, like a new episode was coming out that night. And it was like, I had all kinds of snacks and a whole tub of popcorn, and I had my new Legos. I was ready to go. Like, bring it on. What's the new thing? And watching that show in retrospect, they're very good about their shows they actually did and taking actual accounts and making their episodes. I didn't know that as a kid. I thought that was all fictitious, or 99% was. Yeah, most of it's based off of something. So it's really, I think that actually spurned a lot of people on unknowingly.
Yeah, definitely.
And has a lot of backing to it, with it being based on, a lot of times historical accounts or witnesses.
Yeah, and that Dogman story you mentioned in New England, where the family was kind of overrun by these dogmen or whatever, I remember seeing that on, I think it was the Haunted series, where that's basically like a live action recreation format. That TV show, it's mixed in with interviews, but they have actors come in and they kind of recreate that whole thing. And the way they portrayed it in that show was they just started seeing little red eyes around deep into this field. Like, what is going on? And then over a series of nights, they kept getting closer. This happened over, I think, a few days, if I'm not mistaken.
That's too creepy.
But eventually, like Jeff said, where they were on the porch, like trying to get in. And this family's, they got guns. They're like ready to go to war with these things. I mean, could you imagine, dude?
No.
Like,
Yeah. I think I remember the story was the wife made the husband lock all of his guns in their barn.
yes.
That was across the way, so he couldn't even get to him.
Right.
I think he ran out at one point and then saw that he had a flashlight, and he shined it out, and at the edge of where the flashlight light ended, he could see the red eyes of the dogmen just sitting there waiting to pounce. It was just like, and he ran back inside.
That's right. I knew there was something with guns. That's what it was. They couldn't get to their weapons because the wife was like freaked out and didn't want them in the house because they had little kids and stuff. So, you know, he's probably a hunter and whatever.
Well,
and they had a wraparound porch too, and they jumped up to that second level, which is just like,
that's
wild
when they're
stuff.
getting ready to come in. I mean,
Yeah.
you're in bunker mode. You're you know,
I don't want to be in that scenario.
Yeah.
Ever. Ever.
I mean, yeah.
Because I don't even own a gun.
People talk about, oh, I want to have an experience. I want to see this. Do you? Until that happens to you, be careful what you wish for. I mean, yeah, I'd love to see, you know, we've seen in Switzerland, we've saw what we thought. I mean, it had to be some kind of craft. There's no way these things were, we were way up in the mountains, and we were on a gig at the Co Palace and right above Montreux in Switzerland, and we were just hanging out on our balcony after the shoot. And this light, like Stoner, Chris, we all saw it. We started seeing these things come, and all of a sudden, whoop, they would just go. So definitely not a satellite. I mean, they're coming in hot, like super fast, but it's not like this big giant thing you're seeing. You know, it's just so clear that you could see. It's almost like a highway going on up there.
It could be. And we just don't have a good view of it. No, most people aren't looking up.
And you're, when you're,
right.
we were like 8,000 feet, maybe 9,000 feet in the Swiss Alps up there.
I still think there should be a program where all homes have a camera that just points straight up at the sky, and as a collective Earth, we just monitor the whole Earth all the time, 24/7. We could see all this.
Bub said, I don't want a Ring camera on my front porch. I'm just going to put it on top of the house and just point it straight up in the air.
I just want to see all. And imagine if we did that, if we collectively could all, because we don't all look up at the, if the whole, if any amount of people at the same time said, hey, for the next half hour, this 100 square mile radius, everybody's going to sit there and just look up.
Sky.
Just look up to look at it, but we can't do it. You know, it hurts my neck.
The Las Vegas crash, the UFO crash a month ago.
Yeah,
all that was captured on all these different Ring cameras, and the whole story of the kid with the 8-foot aliens in his backyard. And we covered this whole. George Knapp now kind of thinks, well, he went to go interview them and they didn't show up. They had the whole thing scheduled out. But is the family just like, oh God, we didn't want to be famous?
Overwhelmed.
What have you done? The kid Angel, who's created a YouTube channel, put that video out there, and he's like, maybe his family was like, you got to stop. You can't do this interview. We're getting way too much attention. Who really knows?
Yeah.
But it all kind of coalesced with David Grush coming out with the whistleblower information.
There's a lot coming up at the moment, yeah.
Bro, we are in the good time.
That's how I used to joke all the time. Like, you can go on YouTube and just watch like Ring doorbell cameras, and it's the best America's Funniest Home Videos now. Because it's people on, step ladders, falling off their, hopefully not getting hurt too bad. But I mean, it's just like we are catching ourselves with this voyeuristic ability. Why don't we do that? Why don't we make it for something worthwhile of, hell, you could watch, how cool would that be if you had that camera on your roof and you could watch, like, if you lived in an area where you had good stars, you could take that and you could just, like, put that on your TV. You could watch your own nature channel from your home. Like, trying to figure out how
that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know earlier on at the start of the show, I had mentioned, I could talk about a UFO sighting.
Yeah.
Now that we're talking about UFOs, you guys want to hear
please,
the major one I've experienced?
Yes.
I mean, yes.
No, of course, yeah. So my big experience, and I've seen like a couple of like weird things in the sky that I'm like, was that something? But this one was kind of like one of those life-changing moments where you're like, oh, something else is out there. And so it was 1997. My brother had taken me to go see the re-release of Empire Strikes Back.
Nice.
Yes.
So, seeing a movie about space aliens, right? Galaxy far, far away. And we're driving back. It's about 9:00 at night. And we're at this point on the road where it's a straightaway for probably about a mile. And there is an airport nearby, but it's not where we're driving, wasn't along the flight path. But eventually the road gets to this tree line and kind of dips down into the woods, down a hill, and empties out into a river valley. And I noticed these 3 lights, 1, 2, 3, in a triangular formation just above the tree line. And I'm like, oh, that's a plane. It's coming in for a landing. It's really low and it's kind of in the wrong area. And I'm like 13 at the time. So I'm not just like a little kid. And I'm sitting in the back seat of my brother's old Volvo 240. And I'm like, what is this thing? And I keep focusing on it. And so I'm like, is it a light in the car, like a running light on the door that's reflecting for some reason, even though it's like the totally wrong angle for that. And there's no lights on in the car except for my brother's dashboard. And I'm like, okay. So I roll down the window because it's, old school 80s car. Doesn't have the automatic windows like we do these days. And I look out the window. Lights are still there in the sky. And then I notice they're not moving. And I'm like, that's really weird. They're not moving. So this isn't a plane. What the hell is this thing? And I've seen plenty of UFO specials because, early mid 90s, that's like, that was my jam. Like watching all these like specials and documentaries and, In Search of and sightings and stuff on the Sci-Fi Channel. And I think at that point I was aware of the triangle sightings in Belgium that happened in 1990. Right. And so I was like, oh God, is this a triangle? What is this thing?
Yeah.
And we're getting closer to it. And this is all over the span of 2 minutes maybe, because we're going 35, 40 down this road and it's a mile off. And we finally get to the tree line and this thing is still there. And I could really only see the 3 lights at first, but we went down the bend in the road into the woods and we drove right under this sucker.
Whoa, dude.
And one of the lights was obscured. You could still see the other 2, and it was a pretty clear night and you couldn't see stars in between the lights. So it was one solid object,
right?
The TR3B Black Manta, whatever people call it,
right?
And looking back on it, it's likely one of ours, but it might not have been. I can't say, but
that seems to be
what military or Air Force bases would be out there to house something like that where you're near. Is there anything that would be close by?
The only places, I think at the time there was one in Plattsburgh, New York. There was an airfield there, and at the Burlington International Airport, there is also the Air Guard, but they were only housing F-16s at the time. Yeah. And they only had four hangars. There's no way that they're holding something that size. Right. And once Google Maps came out, or Google Earth rather, I went back and looked at the area where I saw this thing and tried to remember to the best of my ability how far apart the lights were based on, there was a house right nearby too. That was right on this house's property. And the thing was the size of a football field. Wow. It was huge. So I don't know what kind of secret programs are going on or if this is, something else, but the size of a 747 at least. Yeah, it was huge.
And that's, these triangular craft with the 3 lights. I mean, you hear a lot of these type of stories and the consensus is that it is some kind of, secret operation or secret program, that it is a terrestrial reverse engineered craft of some sort.
I think that's
and they're out there testing it at night.
I think that's been going on for a long time. I think with the Grush thing,
That's what Grush
you've got a lot
about.
of politicians right now talking about it. I don't know if it's Rubio's the one that's kind of championing it too, but whatever. But like the sentiment of people in government that know about this stuff think if they come forward, they will be killed. Right, like it's got this whole dagger and cloak surrounding
Grush is just
it.
the first. Like,
I know
there's going to be so many more with this whistleblower act.
Yeah,
we're going to learn so much in the next year.
But also,
it's going to be really
like
interesting.
The aerospace companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, all these companies that I can't remember the gentleman. Is it Ross Coulthart? Some gentleman was talking about the fact that say you're Raytheon or Lockheed Martin, and you were gifted one of these craft or a piece or something by the government back in the day to work on and develop. And he's talking about how he thinks they're dumping some of this technology because they do not want to be culpable.
Well, they're supposed to disclose to Congress, to the Senate majority, the committee, all of the exotic material. That's what just came out last week.
Oh, really?
That they have to, and if you're Raytheon, you have to let them know, like, hey, this is when we received this.
Right.
We got this from a downed aircraft or reverse engineering, and this is all the technology that they're not going to enforce that, dude. These companies, these military industrial they're so powerful, dude. Congress is nothing compared to these companies.
It's House of Cards, right? It's such a wicked web of who's tied to who and who's greasing whose wheels, and don't cross this person, or it has to be that way. It has to be that way.
It's compartmentalized.
If we can dream it, what is the statement from Saving Silverman? If you can dream it, you can do it. If that's what we're dreaming up is probably happening, I think a lot of that stuff. I mean,
we're there.
I always think of the government as like parents. And how do you get your kids to do things? Sometimes you just got to do the because I told you so or because I said so. It doesn't make any sense, but damn it, Dad said it. I got to do it. The government is the parents to the populace, right? Like, and they're like, we're not going to give you idiots all this information. We need you to do this, this, and this. Like, I really do. I don't think we're like even considered in the process of how that's disseminated at all, and
whether they like it or not, it's coming. It's coming.
You think
out.
so?
It's coming.
I mean, I hope so. I got my popcorn ready.
They'll slow drip it, but I don't think you can stop these whistleblowers coming out.
How long before I get my own UFO to fly around to another galaxy?
That ain't happening, bud.
Okay. Ever?
While we're on the subject of UFOs, Jeff, I wanted to, I've been catching up on some of your episodes, and a story that I've never heard of that I thought was super fascinating is the Stardust Ranch story, which kind of has everything. I mean, you've got paranormal, you've got UFO. You haven't heard of this?
I think I've heard the name, but I don't know.
It sounded familiar to me too, but I'd never heard. First of all, folks, if you want to listen to the full episode, it's a part 1 and part 2 on Strangeology, and he goes deep. But just to kind of give us a broad stroke of that story, because it blew my mind listening the last few days of
Game on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was a story that I had actually came across while I was scrolling through TikTok, and I was like, I got to look into this.
Yeah.
And I feel like had heard the name before when I was reading about Skinwalker Ranch. So Stardust Ranch is this area in Buckeye, Arizona. It's this 10-acre property on Tut Hill Road. And this couple back in the 90s, this guy, John Edmonds, and his wife, Joyce. John Edmonds was a clinical therapist, social worker, and his wife, Joyce, did clerical work for the FBI in Phoenix. And he had gotten burnt out on doing therapy and counseling. And he had this dream of wanting to own a horse ranch where he would rehabilitate horses. And so he found this property. His wife didn't want to go there. They checked it out. She was like, nope, I don't want to live there. But they they did it anyway. He put his life savings into buying the place, and pretty much on the first day, like weird stuff started happening. The previous owners were nowhere to be found, and they went in there to start moving their stuff in. They had their U-Haul truck, and all of the the previous owner's belongings were still in the house. All the appliances, the TVs, there were clothes in the dressers in the bedroom. There were still unused towels hanging up.
Just generous people.
Not a good sign.
They're generous.
Not a good sign.
And so John's pissed, and he calls his real estate agent, and he's like, oh, well, I should be able to get a hold of the previous owners by the afternoon, and we can get this sorted out for you by the evening. And so they go kill time in downtown Buckeye for the rest of the day, John and Joyce, and they go see a movie, have some lunch. They come back at the end of the day, and they go back to the house, and everything's out. They're like, how the hell did they get all this stuff out of here? There was like everything was in the house. There were beds, couches, chairs, everything. And so they're like, okay, we'll start kind of sweeping the place up, getting things ready to move everything in, because it was the end of the day. They're not going to spend the whole night moving all of their stuff in.
Right.
And the only thing they brought in was a mattress, so they had a place to sleep. And it was right before they were about to turn in for the night, and there was a pool in the backyard. And if you're familiar with towns in the Southwest, like New Mexico, Arizona, a lot of these houses that are out in the desert, they have a brick wall around the property, and it's desert scrub. They don't have grass.
Right.
But in this backyard that's fenced in with like a brick wall, there's a nice in-ground pool. And so John goes back out there, turns on the backyard light, and he sees that everything in the house is in the pool. And it's an empty pool. It's not full with water, but everything, couches, the beds, the dressers, all of the kitchen appliances, like the fridge, the TV that was still in the house, clothes, everything had been put into this pool.
This story's wild.
And so he gets on the phone, and he's got one of those like mid 90s. It's 1996. He's got one of those big brick phones, and he calls the real estate agent. And he's like, "What the hell is going on here?" And he's like, "Well, we didn't get a hold of the previous owners. They're AWOL. Like their number's disconnected. We can't get a hold of them. And so I guess it looks like you have a bunch of nice free stuff." And we can't help you because if you paid for the house in cash. So over the course of the next few weeks, I think John had taken all the stuff out and put it on the side of the road for free. And most of the stuff eventually found a new home. But in short order, they started experiencing weird stuff around the ranch, like missing object phenomena. Like he'd put something down, turn around, and then go back, and it would be gone. Like he was tinkering around, doing a lot of repairs, getting the horse rehabilitation place open. There were like horse stables and everything on the ranch. And he used to like to drive out into the desert every once in a while, and he would see lights in the sky that weren't ours. They weren't our planes or anything. And they're pretty close to the Estrella mountain range, and there's an airfield there for the Air Force. But this wasn't planes that were taking off from there. These are just like UFOs in the sky over the ranch. And eventually they started seeing ghost light orb type things like in the desert, like on their property or just beyond like the back of their property. And so they're like, okay. And mostly John's seeing this. Joyce isn't really seeing a lot of this stuff happening. And it gets to the point where there's one morning where he wakes up and one of his dogs, and he's a big dog lover, big animal lover. He has at the time he had 9 Rottweilers.
Good
and he
grief.
kept them overnight in cages outside under one of the ranch structures. And one morning he gets up, and there's one of his dogs has been mutilated. Somehow it was let out and it was flattened like a pancake. Totally no blood. So like some force came around and messed with him. in that way, it was like his favorite dog. But I should also back up to, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Pardon my jumping around in the timeline here, but
You're good.
After all the belongings in the house incident happened, I believe it was only within a few days or maybe like a week after moving in, and John was outside tinkering around, and there was this man that was walking down Tut Hill Road and comes up, opens up the gate. They have this big iron barred gate to the ranch that goes up the driveway. And this guy comes up, and John's like, can I help you? Like, what do you want? He's like, oh, I live here on the ranch. And he's like, no, you don't. Like, I just bought this place. There's no one that lives here. And he like scans around. He's like thinking maybe this guy was living in one of the structures on the ranch. Maybe he was a squatter or something like that, because the previous owners like hadn't been there for a while. And he's like, you don't have any business here, man. Like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I kill the monsters here. And he's like, the monsters? Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I think you should leave, like, get out of here. And he's like, okay. And he turns around and he's like, you're going to regret that. And he walks off and he's never seen again. Yeah. So it's just like, you know,
he's like the resident, he's the resident Witcher of Stardust Ranch.
Right.
And he
pretty
just
much
got dismissed.
He came up holding this big machete too, right?
Oh,
so
well, that's a little wrinkle.
That's a bit Witcher.
Yeah, and he probably looked like a
grief.
Witcher too, because he was like this pretty gruff old man. Looked like he was maybe ex-military or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
The only Witchers in my neighborhood vanquish Amazon packages from front porches.
yeah,
There's a lot of them. It's a battle out
yeah, yeah. And so as time goes on, you know, things just get weirder. And after the dog incident, the horses were attacked next. He lost a few of the rescue horses in a similar manner.
My God.
Like they couldn't have been, I guess, for a lack of a better word, butchered like they were. And they were like in their horse stalls overnight, and he'd come and find them in the stall. They'd be totally, you know, like cattle mutilation, like Linda Moulton Howe's whole thing, right? Like they were exsanguinated of all blood, and there was like weird puncture marks and surgical like marks on them.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's doing this? Like, what's going on? And eventually, he wakes up one night, and he was having trouble falling asleep this one evening, and he's kind of in and out of sleep. You know, that liminal state that you get in right before sleep. If you're in and out, you kind of like, you might hear like the head explosion thing, right?
Yeah.
It jars you out of bed. And he feels this cold, clammy thing hand touch his arm, which is outside of his sheets.
Nope.
And starts running up his arm. And he's like, what is this? And he turns on the light on his nightstand. He had like a baseball bat next to his nightstand. I guess this was before he turned on the light, but he grabbed the bat first and just like signs and just like hits this thing with a baseball bat. Swing away, Meryl. And the sound that this thing makes is like this hissing of a basketball being emptied of air.
Oh, whoa. Like
this weird like
whoa.
And he turns on the light, and there's 3 gray aliens standing next to his bed, and he's about to like start swinging, and they just vanish. They totally just like phase out of reality. And over the course of like 20 years or more,
he stayed that long.
He stayed that long.
Oh,
yeah, he stayed and he would do battle with these things. He found out that shooting them didn't do anything, stabbing them with knives didn't do anything. Damn. Getting into fistfights with them didn't do anything. And they always came in groups of 3. And there was like a principal, like a leader, and like 2 underlings that would come around. And once they knew that he knew that they were there, they weren't so secretive about like coming around. And he figured that they had probably been coming around at night for a while and abducting them, because they were waking up with strange marks and contusions on their bodies.
Why would you stay for that?
Maybe he was intrigued. Like Jeff said, he paid for the house in cash. He didn't know. Maybe he's stuck financially.
Yeah.
I mean, you could sell the house.
They never found the previous owners.
They just disappeared, dude.
Just dipped.
Allegedly. Yeah.
Wow.
They just they dipped.
Did he write a book about all this?
That's what I'm wondering.
Yes, there is a book.
Okay.
Yep. There is a book that he wrote that came out in 2019.
Oh wow.
And so I read the thing, and that's where a lot of the information's from.
Yeah.
But yeah, he apparently did battle with these things, and then the wildest part of the battle with the aliens is that he was driving around at Christmas one day, and he got stuck behind this pickup truck that was going real slow. It had like a Christmas tree in the back and like bags and boxes of all this stuff, probably presents, right? And it hits this bump in the road, and this long, thin like bag drops off, and he stops and picks it up, and he's trying to flag these people down, but they're gone by the time he like gets out and gets this thing. He even tries to catch up to them, and he gets home and he opens it up, and it's a samurai sword, like a legit, like Hattori Hanzo from Kill Bill, samurai sword. And so he's like, well, I guess I couldn't find these people, so I'm going to put this thing to use if these aliens show up again. And he puts it under his bed, and he's one day he's hanging out working on an electrical mechanical project in his living room. And he had learned that the Greys, they phased into our reality, it seemed like, through portals. And they wouldn't come in if you were looking directly at them, but you could see them kind of like poking a head, like their head would just kind of like come in into reality. You could see it from your peripheral vision. And he saw them starting to do that. And so he kind of played dumb, like he didn't see it. And he, in stories of Greys, they're telepathic too, so they can like read your thoughts and stuff. So he, his story to that was that, he trained his mind and having a background in clinical psychology and counseling and stuff, he would get into this state where he wasn't thinking about them. So they weren't aware that he was aware. Right. And so he went to the master bedroom, and he got the samurai sword set up for when they would come in, so he could like defend himself or get them to go away. And they had this sunroom in the house, and he saw that they had, through his peripheral vision, that 3 of them had jumped in, and they were just kind of like milling about in the sunroom, and wasn't sure if they were going to come and try to mess with him or not. So he walked casually down the hallway to the master bedroom, grabbed the sword, and then there was this other hallway that went around that you couldn't see this hallway from the sunroom, so he could like get the drop on these things. And he comes up and he zeroes in on what he thinks is the leader of the 3. He draws the samurai sword and like runs up to it and just like slices its head off.
Whoa. What?
Yeah. And the other 2 phase out. And the reason why this was important is because anytime he stabbed them or shot them, they would like fall to the ground and seem like they were dead, but they would just phase out, even if they were like shot or maimed or something like that. But what he found out was that if you cut the head off, it seemed to sever their connection to whatever reality that they were coming from, or if it was like a ship that was somewhere up in the sky that they were teleporting to. And so that was kind of like the big reveal that like, oh, you could actually cut the head off and stop them from teleporting. So he has this body now that he like stored in a meat freezer.
Dude.
and he got in touch with this UFO researcher whose name escapes me right now. He was a former military guy, and he got John in touch with this crop circle researcher in Michigan named W.C. Levengood, who started researching crop circles in the 1990s. He was one of the guys that found out that real crop circles are physically altered by whatever force is creating them. Instead of the stalks snapping, the little nodes actually extend and then bend, and the plants continue to grow in real crop circles, versus if it's someone with a plank and rope stomping them down, it breaks the plants and they eventually die. And so he got a FedEx package together and FedExed some tissue samples and some of the alien blood, which was like this black, like oily substance.
X-Files.
Yeah.
X-Files, right? Yeah. I don't know if it was black, actually. It might have been
The black ooze.
You know, he had pictures of it and it looked kind of like black and greasy and like, I don't know, you know. And so he sent this stuff out to Levengood, and he did some analysis on it, sent it out to labs, and he found out that the alleged blood, whatever liquid substance that came out of this thing, was like pure hemoglobin. And it seemed to also have some kind of like plant-like properties to it as well. There were these long, fibrous-looking, I don't know if you could call them cells or not, but it was present within this substance. And Levengood was like, oh, you've got the smoking gun for proof of like extraterrestrial or whatever life visiting the planet. But then Levengood was pretty old. He was like in his late 80s, and John stopped hearing from him. They were going to get this whole press release together, but then he didn't hear from him for a while. And his contact, who was the ex-military guy, went up to Michigan to go see what was going on, and it turned out he passed away. And there's, the story goes, and it's not in the book, but there were some theories that he may have been taken out, or like the labs that were doing the work on this were like burned down and all the data was lost.
Oh my!
I'm not sure if that's actually the case, but so he stayed in this house for a long time. There was one incident where, actually several, where he'd wake up in the middle of the night and his wife would be levitating off the bed, like the gray aliens were manipulating her, and one night she was like floating down the hallway and he was like trying to get her to wake up. And then she phased through one of the walls and outside, and there was a saucer-shaped craft that was up above the ranch that was like trying to tractor beam her up into it. And so he grabbed his AK-47 and started shooting at it. I'm assuming this was I'm assuming this was when like there weren't a lot of other houses on this road. Now There are a lot of houses on this road. Yeah. But in the early 90s, there weren't.
And also you're in Arizona in the early 90s where everybody's packing out in the country.
Still the Wild West.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And Ghost Adventures did an episode. They went and did an investigation. Oh. And they thought they found something demonic in there. They had some exorcists come in, Mormon exorcists, actually.
Interesting.
That was an interesting tale. They turned tail and ran because like whatever was there, they pissed off a lot, and it was like going nuts. And then there was some psychics and mediums that came out that tried to like help them out, and unfortunately last year John Edmonds actually passed away. We're not sure what the circumstances were. He was in his 60s. Could have been health related issue that happened or what, but
not a real old guy, 60s.
No. Yeah. So the ranch has changed hands according to property data that I looked up. It was sold back in October or November of 2022, and then it changed hands again this past April of 2023. Wow. So I'm not sure if it was like a foreclosure situation. I don't think it was. Maybe someone bought it, flipped it, and then it went up for sale again. So, if something really is happening out there, it'll be interesting to see. John had claimed many times that Robert Bigelow had expressed interest in buying the ranch because John had been trying to sell it. He was in there for a long time, but he had been trying to sell it since 2014.
Yeah.
So, you know, who knows? We'll see what happens with this place. And a lot of people think that the story was concocted to make it seem like another Skinwalker ranch to get a lot of money. It was listed for initially, I think, for like $2 million when he first, or maybe it was 1.5 million when he first started trying to sell it. And then after they did the Ghost Adventures episode, it went up to like 5 or 6 million for an asking price. And this was like 2017, 2018, but no one was biting. So I think it actually sold for like 600,000 or something like that, you know. But yeah, so there's the idea that like the story was made up and stuff. But
that's
you know,
a lot.
That's a lot of stuff. And he claims he wasn't ever a UFO guy. This isn't anything he was ever interested in his life. And it was just something that he had to deal with. And he stayed there so long because he put his life savings in there. Right. He thought he could handle it as the man of the house. And so, you know, it could very well be one of these window areas. I mean, there's Sedona, Arizona, just a couple hours north. Roswell's not that far away, you know. There's all sorts of high strangeness in the Southwest to begin with. You know, who's to say this isn't one of them? Right. You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the inspiration of the Strange Road. Like when I had in my head of like what would a strange road look like, the American Southwest popped up to me just because of some of the trips that we've had and places we've explored, petroglyph sites and vortexes around Sedona, and
it just looks strange out there.
The stories we've heard and been on back roads, you know, late night out in the desert. It's creepy. It's a weird part of America. You know, New Mexico, they don't call it the land of enchantment for nothing.
I think it kind of feels like outer space because you get very remote. You're like, if you don't get gas now, there's no services for 400 miles or whatever it is. Like, you better have gas and food and a phone, and you don't see a car. Like, my wife and I have done the same, driving all over in Montana and Wyoming, and you do. You just feel very remote, and you're like, I'm on a island. Like, there's no one here. Like, you could do anything. It doesn't. It's and then that's where the weird stuff happens. You know, it's kind of like it's the preserve for the strange. You know.
To go back just a little bit, Jeff, we have a friend, crop circle researcher that from Michigan. I wonder if Jeff knows this gentleman at all. Our friend Jeffrey Wilson, who
he might know,
lives right next to Serpent Mound now. He's a Serpent Mound researcher, but he initially came to was invited by his now wife Delcy to basically crop circle showed up right across the road from Serpent Mound in 2003. The 20th anniversary is coming up. She got a hold of Jeff and his organization, the ICCRA, and they all came down there with this gentleman, Roger, and then Pete Hardinger, who's a longtime 40-year UFO researcher out of Circleville, Ohio. They kind of all ascended into this crop circle, and they spent many years researching this crop circle. And the things that Jeff and his group discovered overall was what you talked about, that how the plant stalks, how they're bent and still not broken. And, you know, to let a little bit of a cat out of the bag, we just did an episode about the Serpent Mound crop circle out at Serpent Mound a few weeks ago, and Jeff showed images, the actual proof, and how those stalks continue to grow after the fact, the before and after photos.
They weren't snapped.
And how they were laid down, but they were kind of necrotic in a way.
They were heated up at that joint. Right? The
epical node.
Yep.
Yep. And he used that exact same terminology. So that was like just popped up. But, you know, Jeff is fully immersed into researching Serpent Mound. That's how he came to Serpent Mound, lives right next door now with his wife Telsey. Because
of the crop circle.
And they met because of this crop circle.
It's like a calling card.
Wow.
And it's a very interesting, amazing story. We're hoping to kind of dig a little deeper in the next couple months.
Yeah, he's gotten me
telling that story. But
he's gotten me interested in crop circles way more than I ever used to.
Yeah,
be.
Bub asked a question during the episode, and he just stopped right in his tracks and was like, the question you just asked gets into this very specific esoteric realm that I don't have 4 hours to talk about. We're like, dude, what?
Yeah, I didn't know there's like a whole curtain behind crop circles. Like everybody knows the crop circle, marquee sign, but inside that theater, unless you really go and research it,
He's gone deep.
all of the deeper layers to it, where I was like, there's a lot more to crop circles than I ever knew. But you got to want to know, so you got to keep asking questions and research it. And I think maybe I'm like most people, I'm like, nobody really knows. They're cool designs,
and they're doing high scientific research. If you go to iccra.org, that's Jeff and his group.
Yeah.
Like I said, he was way into researching crop circles.
Well,
now he's focused on Serpent Mound, but now it's
the next year.
It's all coming back. Yeah.
It echoed is what he said. So the literal design, the next season of crops,
after they had
popped right back up,
but in a negative image, like where the crops were laid down, it popped up in a negative image of these beautiful giant purple flowers that where the crops laid down, it was now growing up. Everything else around it was normal, but in the spots that were laid down was this like amazingly beautiful purple flowers that were the reverse image.
Yeah, except for the spot that had
and he had
more
photos
water.
of all that. Like you can see he's got receipts, dude.
Yeah.
He's got real legit measurements, like they're measuring all sorts of frequencies and
gravitational disturbances, magnetic disturbances, electrical, whatever he can do to get a reading. I mean, they're taking radiation readings with Geiger counter. I mean, he's done this for a long time, so he is the Serpent Mound guy, but he's also the crop circle. Like he wears two of these
all from Michigan.
big,
That's
big
what
hats.
Really, when Jeff mentioned that, I was like, ding,
Yeah,
whoa,
I know.
Michigan crop circle
I thought
guy.
the same thing when he said that. I was like, are you talking about Jeff Wilson?
Yeah, I was
different
like,
guy.
totally different guy.
That would have been too funny. He's like, you know Jeff too? Weird.
Yeah, I wonder if those two knew each other.
Hey, well, we'll have to ask him in the next iteration of Jeff.
Man, Stardust Ranch, what a fascinating story.
Probably going to be looking into that.
Folks, if you guys, Jeff's got an amazing breakdown of part 2. And what episode number was that? So folks can find that, Jeff.
I don't it's in my third season, should be episode season 3, episodes 6 and 7, I believe.
Okay. There you go, folks.
Awesome.
Season 3, episodes 6 and 7. Go to Strangeology. I think it's called the Saga of Stardust Ranch.
That's so cool.
So go check that out. I haven't finished part 2 yet, but
I'm gonna be putting it on today.
Oh my God, that's such an amazing story.
I'm gonna put it on and do my work. Put it on.
Yeah, it's great. Jeff, this has been awesome. It's been super fun chilling with you today. Yeah,
I had an absolute blast.
Same.
Mine's blown again. This is ranks up there as one of the dopest episodes we've done.
Yeah, yeah. You've got such a broad knowledge base and just, storytelling abilities and just a desire and passion for it that it makes it really easy to have a conversation about it, because it's just like, go, Jeff. What else do you got? I feel bad. I feel like I'm just like beating this pinata of cryptid conspiracy stories. Like, tell me more. But that's what I want, because I don't have all that. So this is why I love this platform, and it's so much fun having guests on and going, this is what I want. We're trying to get that content that we, I can't get from shows anymore. I can't find them to do good episodes of it. So we've got to make our own.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Jeff, any final words, anything you want to leave the audience with, whether it's, kind of reiterating where we can check out your stuff, but is there anything else that you want to leave us with before we head out?
Well, thanks again for having me on today. It's a weird world out there, so keep your eyes and your ears open. And if you want to find me online, strangeology.com. You can also find me on social media, Strangeology. Just look for me. You'll find the green logo. That's me. I'm everywhere, so you can't get rid of me.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And guys, Jeff does it all. He does research-based podcast episodes, but then also has guests, kind of like what we do, and has other researchers and authors on. Your short video format is kind of like the entry level of like getting into the Strangeology universe on the TikToks, the Instagrams. Like, I just love your shorts and your TikToks, and your reels are just fantastic. The way that you produce those as from us as video people, highly respect what you're doing. Keep it up, dude. You're doing amazing stuff, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you, maybe collaborating in the future on something, if you're open to
it. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the kind words, and same to you guys as well. You're doing the good work out here.
We appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you. And Jeff, don't go anywhere. We're going to come back and we're going to outro the show, and we'll come back and give you a proper goodbye. But Jeff from Strangeology, everybody. Wow.
That was awesome.
Such a great episode.
Such a content of, again, like, how do you... I'm just going to have to sit here and think about all kinds of crazy stuff all day again.
Well, we have a Strange Happenings episode tonight. We're going to be live streaming, which doesn't make sense because this is going to get released in the future. It's all right. We always do that.
Yeah, it happens. It's all right.
But,
they'll get used to it.
But we're signing out. This has been a fantastic conversation. Mikey and Bub for Stoner and Disborough and Master Control. You guys can always find us again at The Strange Road on all platforms. Share, like, subscribe. We appreciate it. All of our listeners and the folks watching in YouTube. You guys are the best. Keep it up. We want to hear from you too. So hit us up in the Facebook group. We got Discord. We've got some things happening. You guys are so patient and awesome. And unless I forgot anything.
I'm good.
Yeah, you good?
I think I'm good.
Well, hey, we're out of here, guys. Have a great one.
Later.
Peace.